in Ruth chapter 3 today. And Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek for you a settled place for you, that it be well for you? And now, is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose young women you were winnowing barley at the threshing floor tonight? And you must bathe and anoint yourself, and put on your garments, and go down to the threshing floor. Do not let yourself be known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And it will be when he lies down that you will know the place where he lies down. And you shall come and uncover his feet and lie down. And as for him, he shall tell you what you shall do." And she said to her, "Whatever you say to me, I will do." And she went to the threshing floor and did all that her mother-in-law charged her. And Boaz ate and drank, and he was of good cheer. And he came and lay down at the edge of the stack of barley. And she came and lay down at the edge of the stack of barley. And she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. And it happened at midnight that the man trembled and twisted around, and look, a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" And she said, "I am Ruth, your servant. May you spread your wing over your servant, for you are a redeeming kinsman." And he said, "Blessed are you to the Lord, my daughter. You have done better in your latest kindness than in the first, not going after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. Whatever you say, I will do for you. For all my people's town knows that you are a worthy woman. And now, though in fact I am redeeming kin, there is also a redeeming kin closer than I. Spend the night here, and it shall be in the morning. Should he redeem you, he will do well to redeem. And if he does not want to redeem you, I myself will redeem you, as the Lord lives. Lie here till morning." And she lay at his feet till morning, and rose before a man could recognize his fellow man. And he said, "Let it not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Give me the shawl that you have, and hold it out." And she held it out, and he measured out 6 shares of barley, and he set it on her, and she came into town. And she came to her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law said, "How is it with you, my daughter?" And she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, "These 6 shares of barley he gave me, for he said you should not come empty-handed to your mother-in-law." And she said, "Stay, my daughter, till you know how the matter will fall out. For the man will not rest if he does not settle the matter today." The word of God for the people of God. Well, psychologists say that most people make a decision regarding a person's attractiveness within 5 seconds of meeting. A few other random facts about relationships. If a man can't decide what to wear on a date, he might want to wear blue. Studies show that women are attracted to men in blue. One way to impress somebody is to mirror their body language. This impresses the date because it subtly conveys that you have an interest in the other person. However, once you avoid copying every move. In the online dating world, men are afraid of meeting someone who's fat. Women are afraid of meeting a serial killer. The good news for women is that only about 3% of men are sociopaths or psychopaths, of which only a tiny percentage are serial killers. Most of us are not in the dating world anymore, so it doesn't really matter, does it? But sometimes we're there, some of us are there, who knows? Then there's this from Match.com. They must have interviewed a bunch of 16-year-olds. 5,000 single people revealed that what mattered most in prospective mates was fresh breath. This was followed by stylish clothes and good smell and good skin and great hair. And really some of this is true even in the Bible. In our passage this morning, Ruth chapter 3, a desperate mother-in-law instructs her widowed daughter-in-law on how she could catch a husband. You must bathe and anoint yourself and put on your garments. And which almost teasingly hints at an erotic experience. And go down to the threshing floor where they can be sure, her prospect was working late. And studies show that 4 out of 10 workplace dating relationships result in marriage. The daughter-in-law is then told to take note of where her intended beds down for the night, so that she wouldn't get the wrong guy. And then, after he's had supper and a little wine and is fast asleep, sneak up on him, because you don't want to wake him up, and uncover his feet and lie down and wait for him to tell you what to do. Just reading the Bible here. In the 5th century BC, when Ezra was chief priest and Nehemiah was governor of Israel, Judah, they enacting an aggressive separation policy requiring Israelite men to divorce their Moabite wives and to banish the children born in those marriages. And someone else composed this subversive story about a Moabite woman named Ruth. The book of Ruth. 2 destitute widows, Naomi of Bethlehem and her daughter-in-law Ruth, the Moabite. Naomi is very bitterly convinced that God is out to get her. The matriarch is nevertheless determined to go back to Israel, right smack into the hands of God. And Ruth, with no future as a widow, childless Moabitess in Israel, decided she's going to have this irrational moment and to cleaving to Naomi in terms the Bible reserves for marital commitments. So, wow. Ruth, what is it with all this loyalty and love? Where do you think it's going to get you? Certainly, not... Naomi's bitterness has not been exactly evangelistic for you. And of course, we know, don't we? Studies show that happiness is contagious and that it's hard to walk away from happy people. But so with bitter people, misery may love company, but it's not likely to find any. But Ruth inexplicably abandons her own country, Moab. She leaves her family, her friends, her culture, her religion to follow Naomi into Israel. Judaism has, ever since viewed her decision as a kind of actually a religious conversion, following in the footsteps of Abraham and leaving a foreign land and going to who knows where. And, a very dramatic come to Yahweh moment for her. But like Moses, Abraham. Except, when she gets to Bethlehem, there is nothing seems very promising to her. She's will live this life of degrading daily humiliation, forced onto welfare, going out into the fields to glean for her supper, a very back-breaking practice where the poor are permitted to scavenge the grain that has been inadvertently dropped by those who are harvesting. No, not really unlike the poor today who maybe in a more urban setting where you can actually make some money at doing this, they scavenge for aluminum cans and turn them back in for a little bit of coin. Humiliating work, but a girl's got to eat, so she goes to find a field to glean in. As Providence has it, it's the field she found was the property of Naomi's cousin Boaz, who unexpectedly, surprisingly flung wide the gates of graves and granted Ruth privileged access to his fields and his workers and his table and his provisions and even access to himself. But by the end of the first day, Ruth the Moabitess has gleaned more grain than one normally collects in a month. So, I don't know how in the world she managed to drag all that stuff home. She didn't have a donkey or anything. And Naomi obviously is flipped out of her gourd, with excitement. Whoa! And especially, since she learned that cousin Boaz had been behind it all. And God's providence, again, by his providence, Boaz, a wealthy, prominent, middle-aged man, apparently never married, a landowner, turned out to be a kinsman redeemer, an ancient title within Jewish family law, denoting one's responsibilities to preserve and care for one's tribe. Kinsman redemption was the right to claim the land inheritance and all that goes along with the land, all the women were property that back then. So, and which included the social redemption of the childless widow of the husband who had died. And the wedding bells go off in Naomi's head. She can see where all this is going to go, may possibly go. And she gets excited. However, Boaz is, for whatever reason, failing to take the initiative. Studies show that nearly 40% of men do not feel confident meeting women. Therefore, being a good Jewish mother-in-law, Naomi takes matters into her own hands. But why all the sneaking around? If kinsman redeemer obligations were in effect, why not just make arrangements directly? I mean, there's this isn't private. This is all publicly. Why cook up this surreptitious plan? After all, at the threshing floor, the place where good grain is separated from unwanted chaff, and which was a notorious party scene at harvest time. And men working late and staying the night and getting wasted and hooking up. Who would knowingly send a daughter into that? Even if studies do show, threshing floors are a good place to meet people. Rather than light of day, why? Naomi sent Ruth under a cloak of darkness. This whole uncovering the feet thing and lying down, loaded with sexual innuendo, and the chances of Ruth being misinterpreted and misunderstood so enormous. Then again, maybe this was Naomi's intent. Again, those wedding bells going off in her head. Don't let yourself be known to the man till he has finished eating and drinking. She was desperate for Ruth, to get Ruth married. So apparently she'd do whatever it took, except, men only take advantage of women like this. When they do, they're never intent on marrying them. That's not what this is about for the man. And this is why dating experts typically suggest, not being too available. Because you play hard to get until, just let yourself take much longer in being chased. Let them think they're chasing you, and more likely love will blossom. But nevertheless, Ruth came to lie down at Boaz's feet in the dark of night, such that it happened that Boaz was awoke with alarm. What? And all sorts of reactions are possible here. Umbrage and embarrassment, delight, whatever. But Boaz was brusque. He asks, "Who are you?" It's dark, of course. He doesn't immediately recognize her, especially after having just woken up. What's going on? And here's where Ruth departs from the script. Naomi had written the script for her. That, when he wakes up, do what he tells you to do. Only she, rather than waiting for Boaz to tell her what to do, she changes the plan. And she says, and this wasn't the plan. She says, "May you spread your wing over your servant, for you are a redeeming kinsman." Sheltering wings can be a symbol of marriage, all the way throughout the Old Testament. It seems Jesus is being very delicate here in threading a needle, trying very carefully to avoid the explicit reference to marriage, yet instead using that same image, because it also has the more general connotation of shelter. Either way, it can be very easily misunderstood. And so the man spreading his wings over you is regardless of all the confusion that's possible, it's being very forward on her part. She just, and easily, and Ruth, went on to demand Boaz do his duty, all despite studies showing that men hate demanding women. You are a kinsman redeemer, she insisted. Redeem me, all of which Boaz understands not as some brazen act of desperation. I mean, but it could be. But he doesn't interpret it that way. He sees it as a beautiful act of loyalty. Because appearing as she has before Boaz in the night, she risks any reputation and goodwill she has to secure not just a future for herself, but for her mother-in-law's family. Blessed are you to the Lord, Boaz replied. You have done better in your latest kindness than in the first. And then he added, not going after young men, whether rich or poor, because Boaz is middle-aged, She's a young woman, and she could go after any young man. Apparently, even though she's a Moabite, and yet it had not gone unnoticed that she had always remained loyal to Naomi. So, no doubt all had actually gone as Naomi had been hoping, if not exactly done the way she had planned. It is going the right way, and she had hoped Ruth putting herself forward would put her in the in-law department, and apparently it looks like it's going that way. And Boaz is known as a man of worth, not talking about wealth, talking about he's a noble man, and that and responding in kind as a man of worth. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid, he says to Ruth. Whatever you say, I will do for you. For all my people's town knows you are a worthy woman. Again, she's penniless, destitute, worthy woman, noble woman, good woman. A Moabite? Yes. There was just one problem, though. Verse 12, there is a redeeming kin closer than I. So by law and by custom, this other cousin has the right of first refusal. Elimelech's all of his property, all of his wealth, going to the next of kin. There's one closer. Naomi probably knew all this. She had to have known all this. So why did she send Ruth to Boaz instead? Well, perhaps Naomi also knew that Boaz was a man of worth. Faced with responsibility, always doing the right thing for a worthy woman. It's not something we always see in our day. I mean, it's not that it's uncommon. It's everywhere if you have eyes to see, but it's also out there for our eyes to see. That there's a lot of abuse of women, stories of women abused by men sexually and otherwise, and so many stories of so many people in positions of power to do something about it, knowing the right thing, but then refusing to do it. James Davidson Hunter, in his book, The Death of Character, writes that while most people think of their lives in moral terms and want to live good lives, we are more uncertain now about what the nature of the good is. We used to experience morality as imperatives, and the consequences of not doing the right thing were not only social, but also deeply emotional and psychological. We couldn't bear to live with ourselves. Now we experience morality as a choice. A choice that we can always change as circumstances call for it, situational, ethics, not really grounded in anything. We tend to personalize our ideals, and what we end up with is a nation of ethical free agents where we're all doing what's right in our own eyes. And we've moved from a culture of character, which our parents' generation would have recognized and known, and what we grew up in as well. We've moved from that culture of character to a culture of personality. Personality trumps character today, at least in the big media picture that's being painted for us everywhere. The etymology of the word character is that it's deeply etched. Etymology meaning the origins of the word. It's rooted, its history, its roots of its history. Deeply etched. It's a deeply etched thing that's not changeable. It's there in all sorts of circumstances. It doesn't change. But that's a problem for us. We don't want to think ourselves, because we don't want to think of ourselves as bad or immoral, so we tend to personalize our understanding of what's good as in, well, it's good for me. It's right for me. But this is not true. It's not so with Boaz. He is a man of character, worthy and his character surfaces even in the most opportunistic of circumstances. He's like Sir Thomas More. I don't know anybody know English history, but in A Man for All Seasons, Sir Thomas dismisses his daughter's plea. She's pleading for him to compromise his ideals, because if he doesn't compromise his ideal, he loses his life. Dad, save your life. Instead, he says, when a man takes an oath, he's holding his own self in his own hands, like water. And if he opens his fingers, then he needn't hope to find himself again. So therefore Boaz swears, as the Lord lives, to do right by Ruth. And if the closer cousin does not want to redeem her, Boaz will redeem her. And so, in order that no one get the wrong idea about what's going on, so as to guard her reputation, Boaz has Ruth remain nearby for the night, departing early in the morning before anybody else is up, and he gives her more grain so as not to return to Naomi empty-handed. But more than that, the food, it is the bread, the seed, that it's symbol to Boaz's good faith pledge for her guaranteed future, not just a pledge to her, but also to Naomi. This is my pledge. And so, what to glean from all this? There's Naomi's outrageous trust in Boaz's character. There's nothing in the Kinsman Redeemer Code that says and mandates Boaz marry Ruth or care for them both. There's nothing there that says he has to do it. Boaz could have easily told Ruth she was crazy, especially since Ruth is a Moabite, and they, Moabite women, they leave destruction in their path wherever they go, right? You just don't want to get tangled up with a Moabite woman. And maybe Naomi figured that the only shot she had was to display Ruth's worthiness, as a wife, while at the same time making Boaz an offer he couldn't refuse, especially, if he'd been drinking anyway. And but to do this, Naomi has to have faith in Boaz to get the message and to do the right thing. And Naomi had to have faith in God, even despite the Lord's track record with her. Nothing good ever came out of Moab for her. But far from taking matters into her own hands, Naomi's plan only works if God is in it. She trusted the character of Boaz. She trusted the eventual goodness of God. And then there's Naomi's loyalty toward Ruth's loyalty toward Naomi. Inexplicable kind of loyalty. I mean, what is there? There's nothing there for her. What does she get out of this? A loyalty that carried her to Boaz's bed in the middle of the night. She too trusted Boaz to do the right thing. How else do you explain her refusing to follow through with the seduction and to be honest instead with Boaz? Choosing to trust. It's the cornerstone of any relationship. If you don't have the trust, you don't have the relationship, you lose the relationship. We used to speak of getting engaged as meaning to pledge something, like being betrothed, and we all still. A lot of people still love this language of the wedding ceremony with this old language in it because of this. Rather than just pledging something, you're betrothed. There's a betrothal. It's specifically about pledging troth, which is you're pledging. It's choosing to trust. You're pledging. Trust is a move of loyalty, like Ruth to Naomi, a determination of will and faith, regardless. It's why we're asking in wedding ceremonies not do you love or do you trust, but will you love and will you trust, for better or for worse? No matter what, will you love and will you trust, as long as you both shall live? And then there's Boaz, a man of character. He could have easily have chosen to misinterpret Ruth's advances. He could have easily have twisted that into something that suited his momentary interests, disregarding her intentions, her best intentions. He chose actually to attribute to her the best of intentions, and he chose to think well of her even when things looked like were going bad. And Ruth is Boaz being naive? I don't think he is. I think it's an act. It's an act of kindness, an act of biblical kindness that bears all things, as Paul, in the words of Paul, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And it's a kindness that refuses to exploit Ruth's vulnerability, looking for what he could get out of this. He concerns himself with her reputation, her security, her best interests. And all of this, none of this every bit of this will end up being very costly for him. This inheritance that he is going to take upon himself. And, you think he's making a lot of money here? Well, there's, he's got these two women. He's got this family. He's got their families. He's got, there's a lot that he's committing himself to, and he did the right thing. An act that many interpret as typifying the way of Christ. It's what Christ has done for us. Christ is our kinsman redeemer. Christ does for us. He comes among us. He is like us. He lives with us. In our direst straits, he's there for us, redeeming us with his own body and blood, moving us out of enemy status, which was where Ruth was, and out of our impoverishment to share in his glorious riches, which is where Ruth was. Betrothing himself to us as his bride, as Boaz did to Ruth, and then providing for us his own body as bread, a good faith pledge for our guaranteed future. So, just very briefly, Ruth chapter 1, challenging us to believe in God's goodness, even when it appears that God is not good, or that God is not strong enough. And what you're so, and in the midst of your own bitterness, to continue to believe in God's goodness. Chapter 2, we're challenged to expect grace when we are desperate. And here in chapter 3, reminded of the rewards of faith and trust, and encouraged to be people worthy of it. May the character of Christ, his characteristic love, loyalty, decency, and kindness be the characteristics that others can trust in us. I offer this to you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Let's pray.